Podcast today was not what I expected, or at least the presentation and the situation around our personal life while recording this podcast is not what I expected. But I think it's actually a pretty good segue into what we're about to talk to about today. So our daughter, Ellie, is 1.5 years old. As you guys know, and you've been following me for quite some time, we have a neurological condition, Dravet syndrome, that essentially is seizures, epilepsy, and there's some significant development delays with Logan, our 3-year-old, because of the symptom that she does have. And that does have seizures, so we're very in tune with like what a seizure is, like we understand that. And our 1.5-year-old Ellie does not have anything regarding that. So we obviously were very in tune early on, making sure there was no issue. She does not have the same gene. We did gene testing, all that kind of stuff. So she's free and clear. However, today, as I'm about to record this podcast at 11:45 p.m. or a.m., my daughter, I hear my wife scream, and this scream was different. This scream was, there's a significant issue right outside of this office in which that I'm recording in. So I put everything down and I went out there because I knew this wasn't, standard protocol, Logan having a seizure. There was also no indication that Logan was off in a sense today. So I wasn't expecting her to, but I was also, my back is they're right out there. So, there was no issue with Logan, I knew. And I knew there was something different going on. But the only reason I knew that, all my wife did was say my name. She said Brennan, like my name. And she said BudgetDog. I'm just kidding. I had to slip that one in there. But when she said that, I instantly knew there was an issue. And so I got up and I went into dad mode, full dad mode. I put down the computer, I put down everything. And I said, I got to fix something, whatever's going on out there. And I go in operational, logical, just drill sergeant. And so I walk out there and I see my daughter, Ellie, on the ground. And my wife is holding her. And she said, Ellie's having a seizure. And I'm like, she's 16 months. Like, what? Like, obviously there was but instant was, hey, call 911. Very accustomed to doing so, unfortunately. And so I call 911 and get the ambulance here. And Logan's very used to Erin being around. She does not leave her side. And there's other issues obviously at play. So it is a challenge for Logan to stay here with me. But instantly what I had to do was I had to operate as a father, get the girls out the door, which was my wife and Ellie. To make sure Ellie's okay from the seizure she came out of, luckily, from falling on her head and busting her head. So it was an event trauma-based seizure that we were not expecting. We're still, as I'm speaking, my wife is actually in the ER. And don't judge. I'll explain in a second. And so my next step was to make sure my other daughter, Logan, was not too emotionally overwhelmed by the 13 people that rushed into her house, or that her sister just drilled her head and had a seizure. And my wife was freaking out about that. She really wasn't. I need to make sure she was good. And so that was my focus. And so I made sure she was cool, calm, and collected. She was, and I took her to, finish her lunch and got her to bed. And then I came downstairs and I had to stay here with her, obviously. And so my wife and my daughter, I gave them a quick call in the ER and they're doing some tests and I'm praying, obviously, but I had to have this conversation anyway on this podcast, and it just fit the mold today. No pun intended with mold either, because we just there's been a lot that's gone on for anyone that just knows about her. If somebody's listening to this and they don't know who I am or what my background is, like, what is this dude talking about right now? But for those that do, we just lost our house to mold and mycotoxins last month as well. So there's been a host of things coming at us. We will win because that's what we do. And there's no complaining here, but I'm just trying to give you guys and set the tone of this podcast day, because the original intent of this podcast was talking about spouses with money and finances. And with that being said, I'm going to mark this clip because my wife is calling and I am back. So I just got the call from my wife. This is even better news. No brain bleed. All in all, it was probably a concussion. And that's nice that I got the live update as I'm recording this podcast. So you guys aren't sitting here worrying, checking in with me. But all in all, probably pretty okay. We will do some lasering. We do an LZ30 laser we bought for Logan anyway for her seizures. And we will be doing another protocol with her functional neurologist. So with that being said, now we can kind of talk about the purpose of today's episode. But it does stem, and I think it's a good segue from what we just talked about into this, because the communication my wife and I have superb, top notch. We know we can diagnose what somebody's thinking by the actions or the way we're withholding or holding ourselves throughout the day, right? And so literally, if I, pacing around, she knows I'm thinking about a huge plan, and she's like, what's on your mind? And if she's giving me specific different cues, I can read that like a, um, you know, it's so easy for me to read is what I'm saying. And that's important for finances, but also relationships. And I'm not a marriage counselor, I'm not a marriage expert, but I have been in a marriage for a long enough time, 8 years and counting, to know what it takes. And I've also been dating her well before that. I've been dating her longer than more than half of my life, between marriage and dating. So, we started dating when we were 16. Now we're 33 when I'm recording this. So it's literally 17 years or whatever. Should probably get mad. 17 years, yeah. 17 years since we met. And we've been dating, and we've known each other since high school. Our cues and the tonality we use is very important in our relationship, because I knew instantly, obviously this example is a little more extreme, but when she screamed but I knew that scream, I knew what was going on to a certain extent. I knew it wasn't a seizure. I knew it wasn't a Logan, event. I knew it was something else. I knew it was something significant, which it was. Ellie literally went into a seizure as a 16-month old, and she does not have any history. She does not have any indication she has a seizure disorder. And again, good thing we just got this update. We feel good about it. But all in all, like, the communication my wife and I had that was so ingrained in us just because we know each other and how we speak with each other is really important when it comes to our finances. Because 13 years ago, when my wife and I were getting our finances in order, we did not have the same communication, the level of communication that we do now. And I think part of it is time, and I think part of it's awareness and maturity, men. Girls, you can be more mature sometimes too. But typically guys take a little longer to get to that maturity level, and debatably ever. So if you're listening to this, you can get a good chuckle. But we're in a position right now of, we've been together for 13 years. We have our finances in check. Everything seems like it's played out. Obviously, you have your relationship, conversations, and you're not going to agree with everything. There's always going to be like little fights here and there. If you act like you don't fight, you're just lying. Like, everybody has arguments from time to time. That's a healthy relationship, in fact. And that played out so well for us over the years, and it led us to this point of financial freedom. And my team was actually asking me where this conversation actually spurred from. And the reason I popped on here to build this podcast today was my team was saying, what do you see with a lot of students incoming for BudgetDog Academy, that is, that they're having issues with a spouse? Like, how do you overcome that? How do you get them past their own limiting beliefs about a spouse having issues with their, with finance? And I say, it's not a financial issue. It's not a financial issue whatsoever. Your money issue that's causing an issue within your relationship is a much deeper rooted issue. And again, I'm not a marriage expert, but I've worked with 2,000 plus people. I have had a very good insight to a lot of people's situations. And I've also had somebody that's had a relationship or built a relationship with their husband after 25 years of not being able to talk to their husband about money. So I've seen a lot. And I've worked with a lot of families, and I've seen, as a financial expert and a financial professional, you actually become like a psychologist to people. And I'm not a psychologist. You also sometimes become a marriage expert. People spill their problems, and we care deeply. So, obviously we soak that in, we take that in when we're working with students. But I can't say I'm an expert. It's a practical understanding and awareness level of, I've experienced this with many different spouses coming into the academy, coming into working with us. When they come to us, they typically say, hey, we have a financial problem, and they want the financial fix because they think if they fix the finances, everything else will be fine. So I ask them questions. I get to know them. And then when they come into the academy, I know that's not going to be the first thing that we talk about. I know we'll get to the money part at some point. But the first thing we do when people come into the academy is work with a behavioral psychologist. Why do we do that? Why is that so important? Why does that change the results of our students in such a significant way that you cannot measure? It's because you're uncovering the subconscious of yourself and also of your spouse. And so if we are driven, I think it's like 95% of our daily actions are subconscious. And if that is true, which it is scientifically, then we aren't aware of 95% of why we do what we do. And if we don't know why we do what we do, and then we judge other people for doing things and saying, why'd you do that? I'm thinking from my point of view, even maybe my subconscious, that I'm judging you for the action. That is going to be a wrecking ball a lot of times, and not just financially. If your spouse does something silly, or your spouse gets fired from a job and you think it's because they cussed out the boss, whatever the heck happens, whatever action happens that you're like, why'd they do that? You're thinking from your point of view, and you're thinking your point of view compared to the action doesn't make sense. But their action was spurred because of their point of view or their subconscious behavior and how they're thinking about things. And it made sense to them at that time. And there might be some flawed logic along the way, but we're complicated human beings. So there's a lot of things flowing through our brains, and we don't always make logical, sequential decisions. We're not computers. We have emotion tied to us. So naturally, that fogs our judgment. And therefore, we do some silly things. And then we look at each other, against each other, and we say, the action you took does not make sense to me. And so when you're spending all my money every single month at Target, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And you get pissed off. Why? Because you don't understand why they're doing that. But maybe if you understood the subconscious of that spouse or even yourself as to why you're reacting so violently to that situation, maybe you just could solve this once and for all. We had a student come to us again, and she solved a problem that was a 25-year spouse problem. I'm not a marriage expert. I'm not a counselor. But we solved that problem because she worked with my behavioral psychologist. She uncovered the subconscious of herself, why she's doing what she's doing, and also her husband, why he's doing what he's doing. And simply understanding where each person is coming from solved most of the problem. And it's not going to be an easy solve. It's not like, oh, I understand why I do what I do, therefore every action now going forward makes sense. It's a communication, journey together. You have to consistently communicate for a long period of time, and different things are going to pop up, and you have to constantly communicate. But if you're not listening and you're lacking awareness of your spouse, do you think that things are going to go well for your finances? Because finances are such a small subset of a bigger relationship. There's so many other things, kids, faith, family, finances, fitness, other things that play within a relationship that are going to play out the same way. And if they're doing things as a mom, as a dad, and they're doing things as a parent, like, let's just say, for example, the dad spoils the daughter, wink, wink. If my wife saw me just, hand my daughter an ice cream, for example, which she wanted because she's keto, but you get my point, then my wife might be like, what the heck are you doing? And you don't just give your daughter ice cream. Like, you gotta, we gotta show that this is a treat. She has to earn it, whatever the case is, right? There might be two different viewpoints of that. But if you guys are thinking from your perspectives and you guys don't understand where each other are coming from, it's going to be a fight every single freaking time. And so when you're struggling with money, the reason you're struggling with money is because one spouse is doing something that you don't like from your point of view, and you don't understand their subconscious, and you don't understand why they're doing what they're doing. Maybe, just maybe, that Target excessive spend that's happening with your spouse isn't just shopping. Maybe she hates your guts, and that's a way for her to leave the house and feel some sort of relief. Just maybe. Have you ever thought about that? Well, that happens quite a bit. That type of stuff really happens quite a bit. And when you actually start to think from why your spouse your spouse is doing what you're doing, and you ask, and you're curious about what's their background. You probably know a lot of their background and come up and like where they came from. That influences decision making. And so when you're more aware and more in tune with the individual that you're with, the spouse, and you also communicate and you also understand what that person's thinking and why they're probably doing that action, you don't fight the actual action. You go right to this root problem, because the root problem is not the Target spend. The root problem is she hates your guts, and she's going to continue to hate your guts until you solve the relationship issue, which comes from something entirely different. So you came to me to fix your Target issue. I said, that's not your issue. What happened before target that led to the target spend? And when you start to understand the connections of the brain, of the subconscious, of the communication gaps that you and your spouse have, and you start to solve for that, that is going to change your relationship, and that's going to change your financial world entirely. Because what if, just what if, you fix the relationship? She stops spending money at Target. You solve your problem. There is no more Target spend, but the relationship's better, so you communicate better about your goals that are financially related, and then you can move in the same direction. And if you don't work on that root cause, that root issue, why they're doing what they're doing, you're going to struggle with your finances, but really your relationship. And why does money typically come to the force of divorce? Here's why. Money is a resource. We are barbaric in nature. And so when we lose resources, we feel scarcity because that's how we survive for years. Think about that. We don't have scarcity of resources in today's world, but we act as if we are from the thousands and thousands of years ago generation. And we aren't, but we still have that barbaric mindset. So when somebody takes away a resource from us, we get mad. We think, how do we get that back? We panic. We get nervous. We get anxious. What happens when those feelings happen? All those emotions swirling clouds your logical judgment, makes you yell at spouse for target spend, makes you ignore the logical conclusion as to why she got there, why he got there. And when you actually diagnose it like this and you actually start to assess it like this, you're going to change your whole life. Like this is not I do not want to claim I'm a financial expert, or I am a financial expert, I hope. I do not want to claim here that I'm a marriage expert or a marriage counselor, but I have had enough experience with thousands of literally 2,000 plus families to where I've seen this play out so many times. And I'm an entrepreneur. So at my heart, I think, how do I solve a problem? How do I fix the problem? I'm a big believer in going to the root cause. Business issue, root cause. Relationship issue, root cause. Fitness issue, root cause. All of my stuff is, how do I fix the root cause so I stop the leak? Because the leak's going to continue to happen. If I yell at her for her target spend of $400 and she's stopped spending for the $400, like that does not fix the actual issue, because there's going to be another urge where she hates your guts and she wants that relief and she goes out into shop. It's going to happen because you haven't fixed the actual root cause. And so when you actually diagnose the issues at hand and you go into entrepreneurship mode, which you don't need to be an entrepreneur to do this, but you fix the root cause, you're going to fix your relationship once and for all. I'm going to leave you with some two very practical tips that I've used in the past. And I think this is good for both sides and both sexes. But I do think at the same time, it is very helpful for men because I'm coming from a male point of view. So 13 years ago, my wife and I were trying to get our debt paid off. And my wife didn't really she wasn't against it. Like, we were very on the same page, but she didn't understand the importance as to why we're doing it. She didn't see it as a big deal. And I saw it as a big deal. And it was hard to say, at first I went at her full force. I'm like, let's pay off this debt. Here's my spreadsheet, blah, 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 blah. She's not a spreadsheet girl. Nor should she be. That's kind of weird. Most girls in particular, like left brain, right brain, men, female, male, female, there's just a different way we operate. And we have to understand each other better because we're both needed. But I go from a logical perspective of spreadsheet. This equals that. Oh, that makes sense. Let's do that. She goes, dude, you're really annoying me. Like, let's talk about our goals. So for the longest time, I went at her, what is the logical sequential steps that we need to take in order to get this? And here they are. I'll lay them out for you. Here's the spreadsheet. She didn't receive that well. So I took a step back. I assessed what was going on, and I asked her, what are your goals? Let's take money off the table. Man, she opened up big time. Because she's like, I want to be a stay-at-home mom. I want to, not be financially strapped. I want to retire early, spend time with the kids. The whole dynamic shifted. As a 23-year-old male, that opened my eyes. I was like, I think I just discovered my wife. But I think I just discovered women. Like, this is awesome. Like, I now understand the level of conversation I would have to a male friend versus my wife, just so different. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. Just like acknowledge it and address it. So when we started talking about our goals, she was like, okay, I want to do this, and that. How do we do it? Oh, wait, I have an idea. I know exactly how to do it. We do this, and that because it's on the spreadsheet. Okay, go do that. Let's put this together. Let's work together. Dude, it changed our world entirely. Here's another tip I did. Second practical tip is I knew she didn't want to listen to me early on, but I knew she wanted the result we talked about. So I took a third party into the house, which is the Ramsey podcast at that time. Dave Ramsey, shout out to you, man. You saved our debt payoff and you also helped us in a tremendous way to pay this off fast. But the debt-free screams, I knew our goal was to pay off debt. Now, Ramsey and I, he almost hired me at one point. I love their team. They're great, but we don't always see eye to eye with everything. But however, our goal at the time was to pay off debt. Who does it better than Dave Ramsey at paying off debt? Nobody. So I was like, man, debt-free scream. If I put that in her ear and it's not from me, from another professional, maybe she'll really, really like that. And I'm turning off my seizure alarm, guys. My daughter's starting to wake up, so I got to hurry this thing up. And you'll hear this in a second. This is real life. This is really how I film podcasts. I'm not even kidding. It's going down good. It might go off. So when I started bringing in the debt-free podcast screams we were cleaning on a Saturday. We were driving in the car. She loved them because she started to see how we could do this. And she's like, oh, you actually are right. I'm sitting back in the wings yeah, I know I'm right. But again, it was all about communication skills. And so I let somebody else tell her, here's the solution to what we actually can do. And we hit this solution, it's going to make you happy. So let's go ahead and do it. And she's like, I'm on board. That sped up our finances at the quickest rate I've ever experienced in my life. And there was nothing different from a monetary standpoint. It was just two brains together in the same direction. It is the most powerful thing you will ever experience. Because I realized the root issue of why she wasn't interested in my conversation was because her brain worked different than mine. And that's okay. But if I understood that, I could then go back to her and say, your brain works like this. You're going to want to see this or hear this, which is goal setting, which is family stuff. Change the game entirely for us once and for all. And again, it was all because the communication level and the awareness and the subconscious that we focused on and the root cause of the disconnect we initially had a little bit saved everything else after that. And our finances went crazy. We're now financially free for a good reason. All dated back to that date. All dated back to when we first started, when we initially became hyper aware of each other, to the point now, if we look at each other, I can tell you what she's thinking. She can tell me what I'm thinking, right? So I hope you take that. I hope you actually use this. This was very unstructured podcast today, to say the least, guys. Literally lots. I literally shared before and after, live time with you. My daughter's waking up. I got to go get her. It's been insane. The journey we've had with Budget Dog. If you guys want to work with us, feel free to go in the show notes below and book a call with my team to go to the next level with BudgetDog Academy. I hope for the best for you guys. I hope you take this. I hope you use it because it's so helpful, especially with spouses, because your money problem isn't a money problem. It's a spousal problem. It's a relationship problem. Focus on the root cause and the finances will come and follow from that. Hope you take this with heart, guys. Much love, and we will talk soon.
You've been listening to Money on My Mind with your host, Brennan Schlagbaum. If you found value in today's discussion, share it with someone who could benefit from it too. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, so you never miss a money mastery tip. Until next time, stay passionate about your financial journey and keep taking bold steps towards your money goals.